Okay, thank you very much, everyone. It seems like we're all set and ready to roll today. Thank you all for being prompt and joining us for our part 1 of our Learn Over Lunch webinar series for the spring 17 semester. Our theme for this semester is all about networking and personal branding. And today's webinar is our networking career panel. So we look forward to presenting to you over the next hour. My name is Shannon Gallo. I will be the moderator today. I am the Manager of Career Services here at CUNY SPS. For some of you who have never joined us for a webinar, I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation, and those of you who have attended our webinars previously, I hope that you find this one as worthwhile as the others may have been. We're definitely excited to have two interesting, unique panelists joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get into the meat of our presentation. If you do have any technical issues today, you would need to reach out to the GoToWebinar folks. You can call 1-800-263-6317, then press 1 for GoToWebinar and 2 for tech support. During today's webinar, I'll present just a little bit of information and then we'll turn things over to our two panelists. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to ask your questions. Please send them in to us using the chat field in your control panel. You have examples of what the control panel looks like on your screen, whether you're using a Mac or a PC. So hopefully you'll be able to send us questions. And once I've spoken and the two panelists have given you a little bit of their own backgrounds, we will do the Q&A session, so I hope you'll send in some questions. And finally, we are offering a live stream of captions of today's webinar. So if that's something you would like to take advantage of, the link has been provided on your screen as well as via the chat feature. If we do have interruptions and background noise today during the webinar, I'll just pause for a quick second and then pick things up where I leave off. Hopefully we'll be okay with that. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues Kelsey Richardson and Anthony Sweeney for providing necessary support so that things run smoothly today. Moving into our agenda, we'll start with a brief introduction. Then I will talk very, very briefly about personal branding and the pitch. Give you just a couple of stats on LinkedIn because I think that's something that we'll talk about and we'll hear about from our panelists today. Then we'll hear from our panelists and go through the Q&A session. So without any further ado, personal branding. Just some basic tips on personal branding, which is sort of the way that you would describe yourself and your career and your interests and qualifications. It's something that allows you to sort of highlight yourself and what those things are that make you unique. It's something where you want to think a lot about buzzwords in terms of them being relevant to your industry, but also being genuine and true to who you are. A big part of your personal brand is what I like to call the perfect pitch. Some may call it the elevator pitch. I'll talk a little about that in a moment. When you're thinking about personal branding, it's something where you want to be really mindful of your audience and identify what some of your targets might be in terms of expressing your personal brand. That might be the types of jobs you're looking at or the types of companies and industries that you focus on. It might simply be the types of people that you would like to build relationships with and the people who reside within your networks. Your personal brand is something that you want to really maximize the exposure of, whether it's online or in person, face-to-face environments. It's something where once you've come up with the general personal brand for yourself, you want to make sure that it's something you repeat. It's a persistent, sort of over time you're delivering the message, and it has consistency as well. It's the same message that you are delivering in different formats over and over. Something to keep in mind that also I think is useful with personal branding is credibility, really being able to prove the message that you're trying to send. Make sure that you're always delivering on promises that you make, and that, you know, when you do start building your network, the people that you know and the people who know you can be your ambassadors, and that can really add sort of a framework and credibility to what you're trying to say. And finally, something important to keep in mind is that when you're branding and when you're networking, you want to make sure that you approach it with how can you help others, and in turn it'll be cyclical and you'll find that others are helping you as well. So I mentioned a little bit about the perfect pitch, and this is something that we've sort of presented on many times. We've done webinars just on delivering and creating a pitch. It's really something that I like to think of as your career mission statement. It's tailored and concise and can sort of answer that question that many of us hear, so tell me about yourself. This may also be known as the elevator pitch, with the idea that you could step onto the elevator with the CEO of your company, and, you know, within the time it took you to get to the top floor of the organization, you could deliver your pitch to that person. It's meant to be sort of a powerful expression of your professional goals, and it certainly can allow for more effective networking, and can be really the basis by which you define and present your overall personal brand, like I just discussed. One way that you could come up with a pitch involves 4 pretty simple components. Basically what you're doing right now, what you did before what you're doing right now, what you would like to do next, and finally the 4th, a unique quality about yourself or a call to action. And I'm certainly flying through this because I want to make sure we have lots of time to hear from our panelists, but I think it's relevant to talk a little bit about these kinds of things. So I came up with sort of an example of a pitch that follows along with those 4 components, and this can be sort of an easy way if you're just starting out thinking about your pitch and your personal brand to come up with something. So right now I'm working as a direct care professional for a social services agency in Brooklyn. And I'm also pursuing my master's degree in disability studies at CUNY SPS 2 evenings a week. It's a lot of work, but I like being busy and I've been successful so far managing everything. I had been working in my role for 8 years and was having trouble getting promoted. So that's why I decided to start back to school. Now that I'm close to finishing my degree, I'm pursuing a career in the same field, but I'd like to work in a supervisory role. And I think that my work experience and this degree will really enhance my earning potential too. I found today's seminar really interesting. I just did a project on the same topic, and my findings were very closely aligned with what you explained. I'd love to share my work with you and get feedback. Would you be available for coffee next week? So as I had said, this pitch described what the person is doing now, what they were doing before now, what they would like to do next, and then ended with something unique and a call to action. This is certainly something that I went over in a sort of in a very speedy way, but it just kind of gives you an idea and hopefully gets you thinking about networking and personal branding as we move forward and hear from our panelists today. Another thing that I wanted to mention at the beginning is LinkedIn, and I thought I would just give you some cold numbers to get you thinking about this valuable tool. It's certainly the world's largest and probably most powerful professional network. There are currently more than 467 million members in more than 200 countries and territories around the world. So this is, you know, it's everywhere, and everybody is using it. Professionals sign up to join the site at a rate of more than 2 new members every second. And right now there are over 40 million students and recent grads using LinkedIn. So, you know, with the prevalence of the site and the fact that LinkedIn's fastest growing demographic should tell you that if you are a job seeker and a recent graduate or current student, that it's important that you are using LinkedIn as well, because only 4% of recruiters do not use social media for recruitment. And of those recruiters who do use social media, 87 of 100 use primarily LinkedIn. So it's something that I think everybody should be using to a point, at least, to make sure that you have somewhat of a presence on the site and that you start becoming comfortable using it as a tool for your job search. Now, right before we move ahead to hear from our panelists, I just wanted to mention a couple of things to put a framework around what I think they're going to talk a lot about today, about networking and how to really get it working for you. Something important to keep in mind is the hidden job market. I've seen lots of statistics about how many jobs are never posted, but that's what we're talking about when we refer to the hidden job market. And one of the ways around that is networking, because a lot of companies, in addition to using tools like LinkedIn, they hire from referrals. And that's the hidden job market right there. And how do you get referred for jobs? Networking. It also is something that I like to bring up, a two-way street. And both of our panelists mentioned this when we were preparing for today's webinar, that it's important to keep in mind that, it's cyclical, and it's not just you asking for something and requesting something. It's, providing something and helping others so that they'll in turn help you. And that's what leads me to my next point. Help me help you. When you're networking with a person, many people want to be able to help, but if you don't provide them with sort of some targeted types of things that they can be doing to helping you, they can be doing to help you, it can be more difficult for them to do so. And finally, when you're networking and when you're talking with people and building relationships and rapport, keep in mind that it's not necessarily the best idea to ask for a job. Rather than saying, can you get me a job at your company, maybe say, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's looking to work in your field? Something like that. So hopefully those 4 little tips will get you to start thinking about networking today. And what we'll do is I'll go ahead without any further speaking on my part. I'll get to our panelists for today. The first of those, I'm thrilled to have her joining us, is Christy Goodwin. She is a university recruiter and brand evangelist with an organization in New Jersey called Allergan. Interesting, I found Christy. She agreed to do today's webinar based on a post that I put on LinkedIn. And when she and I first spoke, we had a little chuckle because we couldn't quite figure out when we first had connected using LinkedIn, but we were both excited that we were able to use the tool to connect for these purposes. And I think she's excited to share her knowledge and experiences with you, and I'm excited to hear about her knowledge and experiences when it comes to networking. So without any further ado, let me turn things over to Christy Goodwin. Christy, are you there?
Hi, sorry Shannon. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining, and I'm pleased to be here. And as Shannon mentioned, I am participating today thanks to networking. We did connect over LinkedIn some time ago in one of my previous lives, and frankly I'd like to say, I like to tell people that if you look up networking in Wikipedia, I am sure I'm somewhere on the wall of fame. I have to credit networking activities with most of my career advancement. I heard about 5 of my last 6 jobs through personal recommendations. I was approached for the one I'm in now because of my profile on LinkedIn, on social media. So in those cases, someone had worked with me. They knew me from a professional association or seeing me at a conference. One manager, in fact, knew me from working alongside me at a job fair. So didn't work with me on a project, but saw me at these job fairs and kept me in mind when they had a position. One was a sales rep who helped me move between organizations that he worked with. So you never know when that next opportunity is going to come, and you don't know where it's going to come from. I mean, I've made handshake deals on planes while waiting for my morning coffee. I even made a new friend when I was in Tokyo on a personal trip while in line at the omelet station at my hotel. True story. So 3 things that I just like to keep in mind about networking. I mean, this, we talked about how it's about people, right? It's a two-way street. It doesn't work if only one person is giving and the other is taking. And networking is work. In other words, you can't just network when you need that new job or when you're graduating. You should be continually trying to build your network. And, I mean, think of some times when you needed someone in a pinch, like your furnace goes out and now you need a plumber. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone in your network who could refer you to that plumber? It's the same way to think about your career. So with that, Shannon, thank you for asking me to join today. I'm looking forward to questions and maybe talking even more specifically about some ways we can network. I know there's some questions around it.
Thank you very much, Christy. Before we do our Q&A session, we have one other panelist joining us today. And this one also, again, certainly was a panelist that I was able to secure through networking. Danielle Yango is currently, she's a PR consultant with Cavalry PR. She's actually based in California, so she's joining us from the West Coast. We appreciate her spending her morning speaking with us. Danielle and I first met when I was working at another university here in New York, and she was a student. And then from there, I'll let her share a little bit about where things went from there. But for today's webinar, we actually connected via Facebook. So another social networking tool. I had posted that I was looking for people in my social network who could speak to the benefits of networking for careers, and she reached out to me, and here she is. So without any further ado, Danielle, I'd like to turn things over to you.
Thanks so much, Shannon. I appreciate being on the call today and sharing some knowledge with you as well. So a little bit about me is I've spent the last 10 years working in communications and PR, primarily for nonprofits, working at Autism Speaks in New York City and the Special Olympics World Games here in Los Angeles in 2015. And in this last year and a half, I've done some more consulting work for a few PR firms and companies here. So I'm actually on the quest right now for a full-time position myself, so I'm going to be using the same tips myself that I give you today. One of the things that really did help me, so number one, if you're at a job where you have the opportunity to learn a specific software or a platform or some kind of program, do it. An example of how this helped me was in my first job. When I was in college, I interned for an organization where I learned the program Razor's Edge. It was a donation CRM platform, and it was because I learned that software that I was eligible for a job at Autism Speaks as a data entry person right out of college. So when you have these opportunities to learn these types of software, I definitely vouch for you to do it. Secondly, find a mentor and build a relationship with your boss and your colleagues. That's something that's really been very helpful to me. As Shannon mentioned, I worked for Shannon at Pace University, and she was able to vouch for my experience with her college roommate who was hiring at Autism Speaks. So funny enough, small world, that her roommate was my first boss. And it really is the people that you work with that will vouch for you the best in terms of what your next role will be. In terms of finding a mentor, I know this is something that you see on a lot of these networking and job sites. Finding a mentor is really important, but how you find those is kind of random sometimes. I had not really set out to find someone, but when I moved to Los Angeles in 2014, my husband's best friend's father's business partner, let's say that again, my husband's best friend's father's business partner was located here, and she's a big person in the nonprofit community. So I set up a lunch with her, and she's now one of my mentors and favorite people in the world. It was through a lunch with her Literally, I was looking for work here in LA. Through a lunch with her friend, that she mentioned that the Special Olympics World Games were coming to Los Angeles. And she's like, just take a look at the job site and see what you find. So that same day, I looked online and found a role that was interesting to me, went on LinkedIn to see if I had any contacts that were at the World Games and at that mutual organization, and come to find out one of my old colleagues at Optimism Speaks worked with the SVP of Communications at the World Games. So I found that mutual connection, emailed that particular SVP, mentioning that mutual connection, and he emailed me right back right away, knowing that he worked with my friend Jen. It was just a really great mutual connection. So using LinkedIn as my third tip, use LinkedIn to really seek out professional contacts at companies that you want to work for. That really was how I got my job at the Special Olympics World Games, honestly, because it was because Steve knew Jen and knew my work. She was able to vouch for me, and he interviewed me that next week. So that really does work. And finally, the fourth tip I would just have is the fact that joining professional societies in your field or the field that you want to get into. So for example, for me, I just recently joined the Public Relations Society of America since I'm in PR. And I've already found it to be very, very helpful. Yes, they can be expensive, but in the field you really want to be in, it's really important to be involved in networking with other like-minded professionals like yourself. Also, things have been really helpful for me here, especially in California, but also where you are too, is using sites like Eventbrite, Meetup.com, Levo.org, Levo.org to find a mentor, leanincircles.org. These are all free networking mechanisms to find other like-minded people. And it was through Meetup that I found Women in Technology, a group here in LA that I joined that do different happy hours and talk about technology and working in that field, which is what I want to get into next. So using those types of sites really do help kind of build these network, and I'm actually kind of an introvert myself, so it is not as easy for me to go out and kind of meet random people on the street and go to these networking events to do small talk. But the more you do it, the more easily you can keep doing it, and practicing your elevator pitch and practicing talking about what you've done and what you want to do in the future. So that just getting yourself out there is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in networking in general, but it definitely helps. Bring a friend with you. Go to the free events, but also sign up for ones that are paid sometimes. And it just really does help to just really be with other people who you want to learn from as well. That's been the biggest thing for me. And one last tip is that you don't know until you ask. You can't find out an answer. You have to ask the question. You have to put yourself out there and have that conversation with that person in the elevator, or have that instinctual, if you have an instinctual reaction to someone where you want to ask them a question, do it. Just do it. Everything you do will lead to the next thing. So that's kind of where I am at right now, is I'm looking for work in the Bay Area. So I'm looking right now at connections I have in the Bay Area on Facebook and LinkedIn, and using all my social media sites to really leverage who do I know and where do I know them, and how do I make this a two-way street and help each other. So wish me luck, and I wish you the best of luck as well in terms of your search for your next career as well. Looking forward to seeing what kind of questions you have as well.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thank you as well, Christy. We've started to get some questions coming in, so we're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of today's webinar, which I think is, lends itself to be one of the most useful parts of our webinar. I'll start going through the questions that are coming in and try to moderate through as many as we can. Keep in mind that we have about 30 minutes left for today's webinar. So if we get some questions that may not be specifically related to networking or what our panelists are prepared to answer, we will try to reach out to you in the future to try and address some of those concerns, or I would encourage you to reach out to us in the Career Center, and we can sort of help you with some of those things as well. I really appreciate what both of you were saying. Christy, I think that was a fine example about equating a job search to another sort of part of our lives if you need a plumber or something like that. And it made me chuckle because the last time we needed a plumber, the first thing I did was go on Facebook and ask people in our neighborhood, in our town, for recommendations. So I think that, you know, it's something that if you can do it to find a plumber, you can do it to find a job. Danielle, and I really, something that you said that I think was very useful is you gave some examples of some sites that can be very useful to use in networking that are also free. So, you know, I think that that's a good point. I will mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be posting that to the school's YouTube page and the Career Services playlist. So eventually our attendees will be able to go back and see that recording and hear that recording. Okay, so some questions are coming in. Here we go. Let me turn things back over to Christy for a minute. You mentioned that you had even been able to have some success with networking overseas when you met someone in line for breakfast. So can you tell our group some sort of outside of the box types of things or creative things that someone can do for networking?
Absolutely. So I liked what Danielle said about joining groups, whether they're meetup groups that are free or at a nominal cost, or looking on Eventbrite for some activities and interesting things that are being held in your area. The way to think of it, again, is about people. It's connecting people. It is a two-way street, as I said, and you mentioned it as well, Shannon. And it bears repeating because it's about what you can also bring to the table for someone. So when I meet someone, I immediately start thinking, what can I do for this person? Whether it's their interest is skiing, they mention that they ski, and I may know about a ski club or another friend. Or I was at a women's entrepreneurial group meeting last week, and within the introductions that everyone did, I identified 3 women who have interests similar to me, or I can connect them with someone else. So it's that 2 degrees or 6 degrees of separation, right? So I'm always thinking about who can I introduce to each other to enhance both of their lives or move something forward that they have going on that they're passionate about. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense.
You know, I do want to share. No, that's okay. Let Danielle go. There's a story I do want to share, but I'll hold on to it because I have a feeling we're going to have a question about it. So,
okay,
please.
Sounds good. Danielle, did you have anything else to add, sort of creative things that you can be doing with networking or outside of the box thinking regarding networking? I'm not able to unmute you, Danielle.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. For some reason, it was not letting me go off mute. A similar story in terms of what she just meant, what Chrissy just mentioned. I actually recently reached out to a recruiter at Netflix because he posted a post about the fact that he transitioned from the nonprofit world to working at Netflix. And so I used that kind of same story of the fact that I'm looking to transition from nonprofit to a corporate sector job. So in finding mutual connections, even another recruiter I saw recently went to Dartmouth, and I'm from Vermont. So I use that mutual interest in that same thing of we both had the experience of living in the upper northeast in those 2 small states. So it's just, like she said, it's a very, finding as many commonalities as you can with someone in the soonest fashion as possible, whether it's even, I love fashion, so if someone's wearing a dress that I love, I will comment on that immediately as a way to kind of start the conversation with someone. Make it as easy as possible is kind of my tip.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Well, we've got a bunch of more questions coming in, so I hope you ladies are ready. Okay, so this one I will go back to Christy, and we've gotten two questions. The attendees are interested to hear about what you do in your position, what kinds of positions do you recruit for, and what are some types of things that you do in terms of finding candidates that are networking related?
Great questions, Shannon. Thank you. So yes, that fun title that I use basically says that I am a recruiter. Most specifically, I'm a university recruiter. So my responsibilities are identifying and attracting college students to our summer internship programs, our co-ops, and we have some PharmD fellows. So Allergan, and I do realize I didn't say this in the beginning, we are a multi-billion dollar global pharmaceutical company. We are in a space called growth pharma. Allergan, you may know a couple of our products. While we do have very life-saving and life-changing products in the interest of time, we manufacture and market Botox, Juvederm, Latisse, and those are just a few in our what we call our dermatology pharmacy. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of engineering and scientific and pharmacy. We have MDs and PharmDs and PhDs all over the place in our research and development area. But we also have support. So marketing is huge, and it's different for pharmacy. Very, very different. The industry is highly regulated. Matter of fact, every department has its own regulatory affairs, its own compliance. We need to do everything very by the book, down to what paint are on the walls in our research and development area. Certainly everything that we publish or say needs to be checked and FDA approved. So it's a really exciting industry, and while there's a lot of that regulation, there's a ton of creativity and a ton of discovery that happens. So it's a really exciting time to be in pharmaceuticals.
Great.
And what else did you need to know?
We were just, I'd be interested to hear too, what are some of the things that you do in terms of recruiting candidates that are networking related? I guess the question is, what can a job seeker do to, get a recruiter to take a look at them for a position?
Gotcha. So that's right. So thank you for asking. I am one of those 80 or 90% of folks who use LinkedIn. As I mentioned earlier, I have this position because of LinkedIn. One of my colleagues, well, they're now my colleague, found me because of some items on my profile. So one piece of advice as a recruiter I can tell you is, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile or if you haven't considered it seriously, I encourage you to do that. It is one of the tools in your toolbox that can be very effective. So think of it as your resume on steroids. You can tell a story in a very creative and very complete way, because your resume is your one-page teaser. But everyone, whether it's recruiters, it's future employers, it's even folks who want to meet you, we can learn so much more about you by what's going on with your LinkedIn page, your LinkedIn profile. I know I'm not endorsed by LinkedIn. It's just a really effective social media tool. But networking, in my world for university recruitment, I am always trying to find opportunities to tell the story of my company to students. So my creative ways, I will not just go to job fairs. We don't really do those so much anymore. But I will attend professional events. I'll go to conferences. Sometimes if you don't go to a conference, you can be outside the conference. There's always a restaurant where people are meeting at, or the hotel where people are walking around. So that's kind of a little tip for those of you who might be looking for a job. There could be some folks who can introduce you to people at those conferences, just socializing. Oh my gosh, there's so many ways. I mean, online, I look at articles. I love what Danielle said about reading articles. I have an article I published for the first time on LinkedIn, and there's so many things I want to say, so I will publish more, because what's exciting is all the energy and the activity that's come from that. And I read articles as well, so I will find articles on things of interest for me. In this world, if we're looking for a PharmD, we're looking for a scientist, there could be a group that they belong to that I might want to gain access to on social media, or just in general, a meetup group or something. So, you know, again, it's those connections. I mean, there really are so many ways. If there's, the more creative you get with it, I think the better. And just remember that everyone has a passion. So you can meet most people through connecting and finding that passion and where they may express it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the things that you said make a lot of sense, and you know, I'm reading the questions that are coming in, and one of these, I'll probably turn it over to Danielle too, but you know, it takes time, and I think both of you talked about, you know, it's doing a lot of different things and sort of, you know, thinking about how you can help others and being, you know, aware that it's not something that's just going to turn around overnight, and that you should always be networking and always be thinking about building rapport and helping others, so that, you know, things are in place for when you do need, you know, when you do need the help from your network, you've helped them previously. We did get a question, and I'll ask Danielle to address this maybe. How do you find time to network and do all of these things when you are in school part-time and working and family responsibilities? How do you find time to, you know, really sort of pound the pavement and do all of these things that need to be done to be effective in your networking? Danielle, do you have any tips for the group with that?
It is challenging. I have a 4-year-old son as well, so I have a family, and managing his preschool timing and getting to events in the evening has proven challenging even for myself. So I have to admit, it's been more challenging than I thought in terms of making that work. Finding babysitters. My neighbors, they happen to live in a condo building, so my neighbors who have kids, we trade watching each other's kids for these types of evening events where I have to be there at 6 or be there at 7. My neighbor's watching my son tonight, for example, I'm going to a networking event tonight. So use your neighbors, use friends, barter, go back and forth, like be creative in terms of finding ways to help others, but also kind of use your friends and your network to really get yourself out there to these events. The timing is difficult for sure. Most networking events that I do attend are in the evening. There are sometimes lunches you can attend, so that's another option is kind of, if you can, talk to your boss or talk to your colleagues about leaving for an hour that day. One day a week or a couple of months, it shouldn't really be a harmful thing to you in terms of your overall job. So hopefully you can make that work. Yeah, it certainly does take a commitment on yourself to really make yourself go. I mean, it really is easy to say, yeah, I don't feel like going tonight, and I don't feel like driving to Santa Monica. I don't feel like driving. You just have to go. It really is. It's important. If prioritize the events you go to. At the end of the day, if one is only for a half an hour or an hour, that may not be worth going to. But if it's 2 hours or 3 hours and you're going to meet with recruiters potentially, it's worthwhile to go. So just prioritize it.
I agree with you completely, Danielle, and that's something, if you are planning to attend an event, trying to make sure that it's worthwhile and taking some time to explore the people who might be attending the event. If they have a list of attendees online, research them and try to, you know, make sure that you're prepared in advance. And after the events that you've attended, using LinkedIn to maintain relationships that you may have started at the event, and really sort of trying to get the most out of the things that you are able to do can really make a difference. And I think that, you know, technology is on our side, and using different tools online like LinkedIn and Meetup and things like that, you know, can really save us time, whereas, you know, even 8 or 10 years ago, you didn't have quite so much power to use online networking tools as you do now. So, I think that that's important to keep in mind. Christy, do you have any other ideas on how somebody can find time to do the networking to really be effective with it? Has there anything that you've done previously that you found is helpful?
Sure. So, well, the first thing is I'll say that I remember I mentioned I had a story, right? So first I'll tell the story since it's already been told in a different way. So years ago, I was at an event at a local university. And have you all heard of Keith Ferrazzi? Excuse me. He wrote the book Never Eat Alone. So he was a speaker at this business school. It's a huge event. It was a big deal. He's a major nationally known speaker. And he was so cordial to take the time to introduce himself to us before the event. Everyone shook his hand, and then we all sit down. He starts his presentation, and he says, I will tell you all that every one of you made a major mistake. Every one of you. You knew I was coming. You knew who I was. Not one of you did research. Not one of you had something interesting to ask me about. So you missed an opportunity, because I'm sure that most of you will want to connect with me. But frankly, if you didn't take the time to get to know me with this much preparation, then maybe we shouldn't connect. And it sounded really harsh at the time, but he was really right. Just like you were saying, Shannon, we have a lot of tools at our disposal to be able to learn about people. And I think it was Dale Carnegie that said, the sweetest music to anyone's ear is to talk about them, right? I'm ruining the quote, but I have it here. Talk to someone about themselves and they'll listen for hours. So when you think about getting creative, I go back to the fact that networking is about people. And even Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Eat Alone, ask someone to lunch. We all have to eat. In the morning, people have coffee. There's no reason why you can't reach out to someone who you want to hear more about their business and say, hey, can we grab a cup of coffee and talk? You can find time for that. So that's probably the one piece of advice I would say. You can definitely find time around meals. What are your thoughts?
This is Danielle. I agree with that notion in terms of asking people to coffee and taking advantage of these meal times, like you said, lunch, dinner, and happy hours, that type of things, to really speak up to someone and build that relationship. It really is all about relationships and identifying how you can help them and how the mutual conversation there. So I 100% agree with that. Shannon probably went on mute, it sounds like. This is Danielle again. I do actually want to bring up one more point. I know Shannon didn't ask this question necessarily, but yesterday I had an experience on LinkedIn that I want to just share as well. There's a functionality within LinkedIn called InMail, and there's also an ability for you to make your profile seen by recruiters. It's a new functionality from in the last couple months, but basically I've made that possible for my LinkedIn box to receive recruiter emails. And yesterday I went into that folder and found a message from a recruiter that was looking for someone for a job here in East LA. So in those opportunities, when they reach out to you, I emailed her back and said, I'm actually looking for opportunities in the Bay Area, so thank you so much for reaching out, but I'll pass on this opportunity for now, but I will also look in my network to see if I can recommend any candidates for you. She then, in minutes, responded to me and said, you know what, I'm actually based in San Francisco. Can we talk? How can I help you? I didn't take the time, unfortunately, to look at her profile before I responded. I should have done that, but if I had done that, she had responded, she's actually based in the area where I want to find a job. So it was a prime example of respond to those questions, respond to those recruiters, even if it's a no, and a polite no saying I'm not interested in that job or I'm not interested, you can then take that opportunity to help them by looking in your network for someone who might be interested in that job. And that was an example of a great connection that I'm now going to be speaking to her tomorrow for my own job search in San Francisco Bay Area. So that just really was a good opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Danielle. I think that, that you make another point that's really important is, just taking the time to respond and follow up with a person, because you just never know when, offering to help someone else is just going to turn around right away and be of help to you. So I think that that's really useful, again, with thinking about networking as a two-way street, and not necessarily asking somebody to help you get a job, but asking someone how you can help them. We've gotten two questions that are sort of similar, so I'm going to go ahead and ask those and get perspective from each of you. A person is asking, one person has asked, how can you overcome nervousness when you're in situations where you're networking and you're talking to people about yourself when you don't know them very well? And a similar question has come in, what happens when you're tired and exhausted and you don't know that you're going to be able to represent yourself well? Do you have any pointers or any tips that maybe have worked for you personally to sort of overcome your fears, or if you just, kind of feel more tired, how to sort of get yourself out there and be confident? Danielle, do you want to go ahead and provide a little bit of an answer to that, and then I'll turn things over to Christy?
Sure. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but in the sense of the nervousness piece, I'm still nervous when I go to these networking events. I'm not really great at small talk. It's definitely something that's a practiced and learned kind of skill. But in order to get past that nervousness, you really do have to practice it. So in my experience, one of my favorite things to do is, like I said, comment on their outfit. If you like her dress, or if you love their boots, or comment on the food that's being served, or find something that's comfortable for you to talk about from the get-go that will just at least start the conversation of you're having a similar experience. Whether, I went to a networking event recently where it was literally like shoulder to shoulder, we're all stuck, couldn't move, it was so packed. And I ended up starting laughing with another person. This is kind of insane. This networking event's crazy right now. I can't believe how many people are here. Just something that'll break the ice to get you comfortable talking about what you do and to start that conversation. Finding something you can talk to, doesn't matter whether it's fashion or shoes or like their hair. I mean, literally, I've used every one. I like her hair, or it's something to get the ice broken. With regards to feeling tired, in terms of what you're looking for, I know that when we all have this ability to be complacent and kind of okay in our jobs, and we're not really looking for a new job necessarily. At the end of the day, we all have this passion, like Christy said. There's a passion we have for, whether for me, it's about making a global impact. All my whole career has been about making an impact, and building I helped establish a World Day for Autism, and doing a lot of the nonprofit kind of work I've done. It's making an impact. So being able to find that passion in yourself, to make yourself wake up, to make yourself be excited about the companies you're going to be meeting the people from. Or an example of this is that same event I just mentioned just now is a networking job fair style happy hour. It was on the Santa Monica Pier, and there was about 7 companies who all had recruiters come to this little bar. It was packed out the door. It was crazy, and there was probably only 1 or 2 companies that I was really interested in working for, but it was the 2 companies that were there that I liked. I was excited to go meet that person. And so when I got in line for this company called Thrive, and I met the recruiter, and she remembered my resume. She actually remembered me and said, I just thought you were too overqualified for that job, but I remember you. Please stay in touch. So having that in-person connection and having that contact was such a key thing. I didn't know I was going to run into someone who saw my resume and remembered it, who knew that would happen. But at the end of the day, I was excited for the fact that I was going to meet with someone from these companies that interested me. And if you can make sure to have that kind of attitude about it, you're excited, it'll wake you up. It'll naturally make you more excited and more easily able to be mindful and present in that moment.
I think some of what you're referring to is just simply being optimistic and not having too high of an expectation for yourself if you go to a networking activity or you meet a new person. but just, you know, sort of approaching it where I don't know exactly what's going to come from this, but I'm getting myself out there and I'm giving it a try, and I think that that's important to keep in mind. Christy, do you have anything to add to what Danielle said in terms of overcoming fears or nervousness or just a lack of enthusiasm when you're trying to network and build relationships?
You know, I really like what Danielle said. I have to echo her points about when you're not feeling up to it. I mean, when you're at a job fair as a recruiter, sometimes, you know, you're having a bad day, you're not feeling completely well, and, you know, you're there to do a job, but we do want you to represent yourself well. You know, sometimes again, that social event, you're not feeling it. I really do think that it is about positivity. It is about remembering what your goal is. And there's been plenty of times that I've found myself in the middle of an event and you meet someone, you're having a great conversation, and you forget all about the nervousness or, you know, not being enthusiastic at the moment, right? Danielle had some really great points. I don't know that I could really add much to it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm realizing we've got about 5 minutes left, and I had 2 more questions that I wanted to cover today. One of those, Christy, I'll go ahead and let you start with this one. In terms of networking, and we've gone over a lot of things that we recommend that people do. Is there anything related to networking that you've come across that you think is a no-no or a pet peeve? Anything like that that you could sort of pass on, maybe a recruiter's insider pet peeve that you might be able to share with our group?
Yeah, actually, thanks for asking that, Shannon. You know, if you think about a salesperson who's trying to get that sale, think about the pushiest, most, just the most, I want to say annoying, but that's not even the word. The salesperson, you're not going to listen to them. When you're networking, as I mentioned, we've heard it before, it's a two-way street. It's about building a relationship. It's not transactional. So when I receive a connection request or an email and it's all about what I can do for that person, that's not networking as much as asking a favor. And sometimes, you know, I shouldn't say sometimes, if I don't know you, what's going to motivate me to look at your resume and maybe comment or give you some advice on, you know, someone, you know, with my background, where should I look for a job, whatever it might be. I consider myself a very helpful person. I take time to assist people almost daily. But if it's a request that's thrown at me, or if I'm at a networking event and someone just wants to tell me all about themselves and not get to know me, it's not the same experience as if they're starting out with something a little more personal. So again, building that relationship, I think that's probably the biggest pet peeve I have is the one-way street, the assumptive close, I guess, not taking the time to really build that relationship or be interested. Thanks for asking that.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate your candor, and I think I'm not surprised to hear that you said that, but I think it sort of, it adds a little bit of credibility to advice that I've given to our job seekers in terms of approaching their networking. Danielle, do you have anything to add that maybe you've seen other people do? As I know you're actively networking and job searching now, are there any things that you've seen that, or maybe things that you've tried that have not been effective?
Sure. I think something Christy mentioned earlier is the idea of doing your research. Before you go to an event, try to look at the companies, look at who's going to be speaking, look at their background, look at their LinkedIn page. Really going up to someone, and especially a recruiter at like a job fair like I told you about just now, I knew the names of the people and was able to, once I realized it was that person that I had sent my resume to on LinkedIn, I was able to recall that conversation and have a great conversation with her because I did connect with her on LinkedIn from a prior connection. But I did research. You do your research before you attend an event where you know you're going to be in the presence of other recruiters of the companies you want to go work for. Being completely aloof is never a good thing. And yesterday, I mean, I definitely have to take my own advice, of course, in terms of that. Now that I know what happened yesterday with that recruiter being in San Francisco, I should have looked at her profile first. That was a learning curve for myself. I should have looked at her profile before I responded to her to know that she was in San Francisco so that I could offer that as being, I'm not interested in the job here in LA, but I am interested in the Bay Area. Can I speak to you? I could have framed myself better. It all worked out in the end, of course, thankfully, but in the sense of making sure you kind of are doing some looking online first, doing some research. In my world of PR as well, I'm constantly reading articles and finding reporters who report on a certain topic or industry. Before I reach out to that reporter, I always have to do my due diligence to look at what they've written, find articles, what their beat is, make sure that it's a mutual conversation that I can have with them on behalf of my client, for example, before I reach out. So that just doing your homework, doing your research, and really making sure that you're not just that person who doesn't know who they're talking to at an event. That's never a good thing. So.
Great piece of advice, Danielle. Well, we've got about 1 more minute, so I thought maybe the last thing we could do is I'll go ahead and stick with you, Danielle. Is there anything that we did not cover today that you think is really important for our attendees to know about networking and building relationships?
I think I would just reiterate the point that I learned this when I was at Autism Speaks. My first CEO really mentioned the fact that just because someone says no now, whether it's saying no to a coffee or no to meeting up or something like that, doesn't mean that it's a no forever. You can ask again in the future, or you can continue that conversation in some way. So many contacts I've met at networking events. I sent an email for, a month or two ago, and I'll follow up again with them. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, just because you get a no now doesn't mean it's a no forever. And to keep trying, keep plugging away, and keep trying to grow your network past your people you're friends with now, because your network will eventually get tapped out. Your own friends will be sick of you asking them for help and connections. So you really do have to meet strangers and expand your network in that way. So that's just the advice I'd give.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you again for having me.
Christy, do you have any final thoughts or anything to add before we finish today?
I do. One way to look at networking is about that you're building a board of advisors. Just like Danielle mentioned about identifying a mentor, I've read you should have different types of mentors. One within the company you work for, one who is in a professional organization, maybe one who's very different from you to give you a different opinion and perspective. But your board of advisors, it's really like building your own team. That might be a creative way to think of networking and perhaps give you a way to set your goals.
I like that thinking, and if you think of it in terms of your team, it also sort of reminds one to think of what they can do to help their team. So, I really like that. It seems like we could talk and talk about networking, but it is just a minute or two past 1:30. I'd like to close by thanking Christy Goodwin and Danielle Yango for speaking today on our webinar. I learned some things today myself, and I'm hoping that our attendees also did find today's remarks worthwhile. I will be following up and sending a quick survey to fill out, so please let us know what you thought of today's webinar. I really appreciate the time that both Christy and Danielle took to speak with us and their interest in being able to help the community here at CUNY and at SPS. To everyone that joined us today, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and happy networking.
Thank you.
Thank you.